We'll now continue on the agenda, and we'll go back to item 9, which is the alcohol licensing fees to remain as they are using the default system. So I will move the recommendation.
Councillor Wood, if you just noticed, Councillor
yeah.
Cooper and myself
leaving
the table.
Okay.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Second, Councillor Penrose is seconding it. So, sorry. So is there any discussion on this? Any discussion?
Look at Wayne.
Mr. Wilcox?
Yes. So we kept the fees at the same level. Are we finding that the volume of traffic that's going through is minimal or maximum? I suppose I'm just trying to find out if we've got if the default thing is going to work once the LAP comes along and then it all kind of bulks up.
The adoption of the local alcohol policy may affect our operating costs in that it may see a greater requirement for DLC hearings, but that may well be offset by the impact of the
freeze, the temporary freeze.
So officers at this stage think it's speculative to determine what impact the LAP may have on the volume, and we're recommending that after a suitable passage of time we take a look at how our costs are tracking against revenue.
Thank you.
Can I just confirm, Mr. Chairman, that was about volume of objections to DLCs? I didn't quite hear what the question was.
Yeah, that's right.
Objections? Is there any change in the volume, or what's the volume?
I'm noting that you've listed 1% estimated at 20 to 40, but it's being 1. So what are we thinking? Is that going to be the pattern? Just thinking about costs going forward.
Going forward, we would anticipate that remain approximately the same, because a number of the objections,
1%.
number of the objections at the moment are in relation simply to new off licences, and with the LAP there'll be a freeze in some of those areas for off licences, so we won't have those objections for at least 2 years after the off licence, after the LAP.
Chair, I wanted a supplemental.
Yes, supplementary.
Just a supplemental to that. As the local boards now have the ability to object to the licences, who pays for that? Does the applicant still have to cover those costs?
No.
Does the council then have to cover those costs in our operating fees?
The recovery of costs is specified by regulation, by central government. On balance, we recover a majority of our costs, around about 93% for the year ending December 2014. Those costs are across the funding formula for those costs don't take into account the specific costs derived from operating of a hearing or of an appeals process.
Dick was right about men falling in the line out.
So what I'm trying to understand here, Chair, then, is if local boards have been given that right to appeal, and I take it that very few have taken it up so far, are you expecting that will increase the costs on the fees, or will increase the fees, or how are we going to recover that? Because at the moment there's a 7% gap, so 7% gap could blow out to a 10% or 15% very quickly. Lawyers aren't cheap. Where do we go from there?
So if there are more hearings, the costs that would accrue to the alcohol licensing unit will increase. The extent to which they increase is at this point unknown, because we can't anticipate what the impact of the freeze would be on the licence regime. If, however, there is an impact on our operating costs, if that margin that you speak of, Mr. Wilcox, does change, then we would come back to this committee with our analysis after a suitable period of time has elapsed from the adoption of the LAP.
Final question, why aren't we collecting 100%?
The issue there is the apportionment of the overhead cost. So in running alcohol licensing, there is a corporate overhead. The regulations are very specific about what we can and what we can't recover for. So in respect to alcohol licensing, our inspectors, we recover over 100%. But when you add my costs and our business support costs and others, we drop below that portion by 93, down to 93%. I'm confident, though, looking ahead for 2015, that the under-recovery will lessen because of work that our Chief Operating Officer has led through Project Converge and the efficiency that we're gaining through some of our back office functions.
Right, no other, Councillor Brewer?
Well, just on the costs that you're saying will be recovered due to efficiencies in the back room and so forth. What about point 13 here, page 10? Accordingly, revenue is currently 294,000 short. Can you just cover off revenue gains that are anticipated that might help with future shortfalls?
So the revenue, what we can charge is highly specified through the regulation that central government has set, and it provides a funding formula that Auckland Council and other territorial local authorities can't amend. Through that regime, we're able to cover all of the costs of our inspectors and others. Where we aren't able to is in this table 1, you'll see a figure of 782,000.
Yep.
That, Councillor Brewer, refers to the department and corporate overhead. It is in those back office areas where we're looking at further efficiencies. So 2015, I would be expecting that shortfall, which we've equated at $294,000, to lessen.
If I could just add a point, perhaps point 10 in the report makes the point that in the last year, we haven't been able to collect the full number of annual fees that would normally accrue because the government gave a transitional holiday to anyone who'd put in an application the previous year. Going forward, that holiday is now finished. Going forward, we'll be collecting 100% of annual fees instead of about 66%.
Will the shortfall over time disappear completely? Is that the intention, or will there always need to be a subsidy to cover what you've described as the back office overheads?
Yes, I'm confident that we can address the back office elements, and we will see that diminish. My reticence is predicting what may happen with the DLC hearings and appeals process. At the moment, Councillor Brewer, we're unsure the magnitude of impact that the local alcohol policy will have when you balance the freeze against the institution of the cumulative impact assessment process.
Thank you.
Thank you. No other questions? I'll then put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Against? Declare that carried. Thank you.